The Velanthi Dominion had ruled the Orion sector for 3,000 years, and their empire stretched across 47 star systems, where no enemy had ever defeated their mighty fleets in battle. Ambassador Kethral stood aboard his flagship and watched the small blue planet spinning slowly in the darkness of space, thinking how easy this conquest would be, since his scanners showed primitive technology and no interstellar capability whatsoever. He transmitted the standard ultimatum that had brought countless worlds to their knees, demanding complete surrender of all resources and acceptance of eternal servitude, or face total annihilation within 60 planetary rotations. The response came quickly, but it was not what Kethral expected at all, because the humans laughed at him. Commander Jack Holden of the United Earth Defense Council appeared on the view screen with his arms crossed and a slight smile on his face, while his advisors, Kate Morrison and Danny Vance, stood beside him, showing no fear whatsoever. "You have 60 of your planetary rotations to comply," Kethral repeated slowly, assuming the translation system had malfunctioned somehow. "We heard you perfectly the first time," Jack replied, in a calm and steady voice. "Here is our counteroffer instead. Leave our star system immediately, and never return, and we will pretend this conversation never happened." Kethral felt his 4 eyes blink rapidly in confusion, because no species had ever responded to the Velanthi with such disrespect and casual dismissal of their overwhelming military power. On the 61st day, the Velanthi invasion fleet of 200 massive warships entered Earth orbit and prepared to unleash devastation upon the foolish humans who had dared to reject their generous terms. But something was terribly wrong from the very beginning. The cities below were empty and silent, with no signs of life anywhere, and the military installations stood abandoned as if every human on the planet had simply vanished into thin air. Kethral smiled with all 3 of his mouths and declared that the humans were cowards who had fled underground like frightened vermin to hide from their superior conquerors. Then the first Velanthi warship exploded without any warning at all. There was no weapons fire detected and no enemy vessels anywhere nearby, just a sudden catastrophic detonation from deep within the ship that tore it apart in seconds and scattered burning debris across the void. Before Kethral could even process what had happened, another ship exploded, and then another, and then 5 more in rapid succession as invisible death swept through his mighty fleet. Within 6 hours, 43 Velanthi warships had been completely destroyed from the inside, and not a single human had been seen by anyone in the entire armada. Panic spread through the remaining crews as rumors flew about ghost ships and invisible demons and ancient curses that the humans had somehow unleashed upon them. Deep within the command vessel, Kethral received a transmission on a secure frequency that should have been absolutely impossible for any outsider to access. And when the screen flickered to life, he saw a human face staring back at him. It was a woman with short dark hair and cold eyes that seemed to look right through him, and her voice was calm and measured as she spoke. "My name is Captain Amy Reeves, and I lead what my people call a Special Forces unit," she said without any trace of emotion. "There are currently 16 of us aboard your flagship right now, and your engine room will detonate in approximately 4 minutes, so I suggest you begin evacuation procedures immediately." "Impossible," Kethral stammered as his blood ran cold. "Our ships are completely sealed, and our security systems are impenetrable by any known technology." Amy smiled, but there was absolutely no warmth in it whatsoever. "Nothing is impenetrable to us, because we have been trained since childhood for situations exactly like this one," she explained. "We do not fight wars the way you expect us to, and we do not line up our ships to exchange fire, like what you call civilized species." She leaned closer to the camera, and her eyes seemed to bore into his very soul. "We crawl through your ventilation systems in complete silence, and we poison your water supplies without anyone noticing. and we turn your own technology against you while you sleep peacefully in your beds," she continued. "We are the monsters that your species will tell stories about for generations to come." Kethral ordered immediate evacuation with trembling hands, but deep down he knew it was already far too late for him and everyone aboard. The explosion tore through the ship's core with tremendous force, and the great Valanthi commander died in fire and chaos, never understanding how 16 humans had managed to destroy an entire armada of 200 warships. News of the disaster spread across the galaxy like wildfire, and every spacefaring species heard the incredible tale of how a small, primitive planet had annihilated the mighty Valanthi fleet. The surviving Valanthi ships fled back to their homeworld in terror, and the Dominion immediately declared that Earth was forbidden territory, that no Valanthi vessel should ever approach again under any circumstances. But the damage to galactic perception was already done, because every species now knew that the humans possessed warriors unlike anything the galaxy had ever encountered before. They called them Special Forces, and the name became synonymous with death itself. Intelligence agencies across hundreds of worlds scrambled to gather information about these mysterious human warriors who could appear anywhere without warning and strike with devastating precision. Them even more than the Valanthi massacre had. The Special Forces were not regular soldiers, but highly trained specialists, selected from the most capable individuals humanity had to offer. And they underwent training programs so brutal and demanding that most candidates failed completely. Those who survived the training emerged as something more than ordinary humans, capable of operating behind enemy lines for months without support, skilled in dozens of forms of combat and infiltration and sabotage. They could learn alien languages in weeks and adapt to foreign environments that would kill ordinary beings. And their psychological conditioning made them nearly immune to fear and pain and exhaustion. But perhaps most terrifying of all was their dedication to their mission, because a Special Forces operator would sacrifice absolutely anything, including their own life, to complete their objective. The galaxy had encountered warriors before, from many different species, but they had never encountered anything like this. Jack Holden gave a press conference on Earth where he addressed not just humanity, but every species watching across the stars. "We did not start this conflict," he declared firmly. "The Valanthi came to our world and demanded our surrender and our slavery, and when we refused, they brought their warships to destroy us." He paused and looked directly into the camera, with eyes that held no regret whatsoever. "We defended ourselves with the tools we had available, and we make no apologies for our methods, because our survival is not negotiable," he continued. "Let this serve as a warning to any other species considering aggression against Earth." His voice dropped lower and carried an unmistakable edge of steel. "Our Special Forces are watching and waiting, and they will respond to any threat with overwhelming and decisive action," he finished. "The choice between peace and war is yours, but the consequences of choosing war are now abundantly clear to everyone." The broadcast ended, and the galaxy fell silent as every species contemplated what they had just witnessed. A new power had emerged from an insignificant corner of the cosmos, and nothing would ever be quite the same again. 5 years had passed since the destruction of the Valanthi Armada, and the galaxy had changed in ways that nobody could have predicted back then. The Galactic Council assembled an emergency session on the great station at the center of known space, where 212 spacefaring species gathered to discuss what they now called the human problem. High Counselor Yemeth of the Karathi Collective stood before the massive assembly, and his bioluminescent skin flickered with obvious agitation as he prepared to present his findings. "Distinguished representatives," he began in a grave tone, "we have spent 5 years gathering intelligence on human military capabilities, and what we have learned should concern every species in this chamber. Holographic displays flickered to life throughout the vast room, showing images and data from dozens of separate incidents involving human special forces. The Thornax Hive believed themselves invincible. Continued as the first images appeared. They sent 50,000 of their finest warriors to claim a human colony world called New Haven, which had only 300 civilian colonists and minimal defenses. The display showed the barren rocky landscape of New Haven, littered with thousands upon thousands of Thornax corpses stretching to the horizon in every direction. The colony should have fallen within hours, but instead a 12-person special forces team, embedded with the colonists, held off the entire Thornax invasion force for 3 weeks until human reinforcements could arrive. Gasps and murmurs echoed through the chamber as the numbers appeared on screen. Thornax casualties exceeded 40,000 warriors, Yeneth stated flatly. Human casualties from the Special Forces team numbered exactly 2. Representative Grix of the Moldari Union rose from his seat with his tentacles writhing in disbelief. This must be propaganda designed to frighten us, he protested loudly. The Thornax are apex predators capable of regenerating from wounds that would kill any other species 10 times over. Yemeth turned to face the Moldari representative with a solemn expression. We have verified every incident independently through our own intelligence networks, and the humans actually understate their capabilities in official reports, he replied. The truth is far more disturbing than any propaganda could be. He pulled up another display showing a personnel file with a photograph of an ordinary-looking human male. This individual is Lieutenant Colonel Ben Harper of the Human Special Forces, Yemeth explained. His service record reads like something from a nightmare. The display scrolled through mission reports and intelligence assessments that made several council members visibly uncomfortable. Colonel Harper single-handedly infiltrated a Moldari communications array, disabled it completely, 3 high-ranking military officers, and extracted classified intelligence files, Yemeth recounted. He accomplished all of this within a 6-hour window without being detected even once. Grix sank back into his seat with his skin turning pale. When Moldari security forces finally realized what had happened and began hunting for the intruder, Colonel Harper evaded capture for 47 consecutive days in hostile territory, Yemeth continued. He had no supplies, no backup, no communication with human forces, and he was suffering from a severe abdominal wound that would have killed most beings within hours. The chamber had gone completely silent, as every representative listened with growing dread. When human rescue teams finally located him, they found that Colonel Harper had not merely survived, Yemeth said quietly. He had compiled detailed maps of every Moldari military installation he encountered during his evasion. Defensive capabilities and recommended attack strategies. How is this possible? Demanded Councillor Veth of the Rilari Federation. How can any being accomplish such things? Yemeth changed the display to show human training facilities and selection programs. The humans select candidates for their special forces from among their most physically capable and psychologically resilient individuals, he explained. These candidates then undergo training that would be classified as torture under galactic humanitarian standards. Images appeared of humans enduring extreme conditions, including freezing water immersion, sleep deprivation, physical punishment, and psychological stress testing that pushed them to the absolute limits of endurance. Approximately 80% of candidates fail this training, Yemeth noted. Those who pass emerge fundamentally changed into something that barely resembles ordinary humans anymore. Mortal, Veth insisted. They can still be killed like any other organic being. Yes, they can be killed, Yemeth agreed. But killing them is extraordinarily difficult, because they are trained to operate in conditions that would incapacitate or kill members of any other species. He brought up physiological data that made several council members gasp in shock. Humans can function effectively on minimal sleep for extended periods, and they can survive wounds that would be immediately fatal to most species, he continued. Their bodies can adapt to extreme temperature variations and toxic atmospheres, and crushing gravity that would destroy others. Their pain tolerance exceeds any species we have ever encountered, and they can continue fighting with injuries that should render them completely helpless, Yemeth added. But physical resilience is only part of what makes them so dangerous. The display shifted to psychological profiles and tactical assessments. Human special forces are trained to think in ways that other species find incomprehensible, he explained. They do not view warfare as a contest between armies, but as a problem to be solved through any means necessary. They will lie and deceive and manipulate without hesitation, Yemeth said. They will use poison and sabotage and assassination rather than face their enemies in what we consider honorable combat. Representative Koth, they will sacrifice their own lives without a moment of hesitation if doing so accomplishes their mission, he continued. And they will inflict suffering on their enemies without remorse because they view such actions as simply another tool in their arsenal. Representative Koth of the Vendari hegemony spoke up with barely concealed fear in his voice. You speak of perhaps a few thousand exceptional individuals among a species of billions, he said. Surely their regular military forces are not so formidable. Face him with an expression that offered no comfort whatsoever. The human special forces number approximately 50,000 across their entire species, he confirmed. But their regular military forces number in the tens of millions, and while they may not match the special forces in capability, they are still among the most effective conventional warriors the galaxy has ever seen. The special forces are reserved for situations requiring what the humans call precision, Yemeth explained. They do not conquer territory or occupy worlds, because those tasks are left to regular military units. The special forces simply remove problems, he said. Leaders who threaten human interests disappear from their own bedrooms surrounded by guards. Hostile installations suffer mysterious catastrophic failures. Enemy intelligence networks collapse without explanation. He paused to let his words sink in. The humans wage war in shadows, and by the time you realize you are fighting them, you have already lost, he concluded. This is what we face, and this is why this council must decide how to respond. The chamber erupted in argument and debate as representatives shouted over one another, with proposals ranging from immediate military action to complete isolation of human space, to desperate pleas for diplomatic solutions. But beneath all the noise and fury, one truth remained clear to everyone present. The galaxy would never be safe from the humans, because you cannot fight an enemy you cannot see coming until it is far too late. Sergeant First Class Chris Palmer had been living underground for 6 months in the maintenance tunnels beneath the capital city of Korath Prime, waiting for a mission that might never come. The tunnels were dark and cramped, and filled with the constant hum of alien machinery. But Chris had learned to find comfort in such places, because discomfort was simply part of the job. His team consisted of only 4 operators, including himself, along with Corporal Lisa Dunn, who was the best infiltration specialist he had ever worked with. Specialist Nick Brennan, who could hack any computer system in the known galaxy. And Private First Class Mary Santos, who had once held off an entire enemy platoon with nothing but a combat knife and sheer determination. Their mission was simple to explain, but nearly impossible to accomplish, because they had to extract a human diplomat named Greg Patterson, who had been taken hostage by the Korathi during failed peace negotiations. Korathi government had broadcast images of Greg in a prison cell looking beaten and broken, believing that this display would force humanity into accepting a disadvantageous treaty. What the Korathi did not know was that Greg Patterson was himself a former Special Forces operator who had volunteered for this exact scenario. The bruises on his face were real enough to fool Korathi medical scanners, but the placement had been carefully calculated to avoid any injury that would impair his ability to fight when the rescue came. Human intelligence had predicted this exact maneuver by the Karathi months before it happened, which was why Chris and his team had infiltrated the planet 2 months before the kidnapping even occurred. This was standard operating procedure, because special forces never reacted to situations when they could anticipate them. Instead, Ghost 1, this is Overlord. The encrypted transmission crackled through Chris's neural implant. Is being moved to secondary location, and your intercept window is 47 minutes. Understood, Overlord, Chris replied silently through his subvocal communicator. Ghost team is moving to intercept position now. The 4 humans emerged from their hiding place into the maintenance level of the central detention complex, moving through the darkness like shadows given physical form. Lisa took point, and her movements were impossibly silent for a member of a species that the Karathi considered loud and clumsy, while Nick covered their rear, and Mary monitored the facility security systems through a device that should not have existed. Security sweep incoming in 3 minutes, Mary whispered, her voice barely audible even to her teammates standing right beside her. I can loop the camera feeds, but the motion sensors are hardwired directly into the central alarm system. I will handle the sensors, Chris replied as he produced a small device from his pocket, equipment pouch, and attached it carefully to a junction box on the wall. The Karathi motion sensors operated on a specific frequency that human scientists had decoded years ago during a previous intelligence operation. And this device did not disable them, because that would immediately trigger an alert. Instead, it convinced the sensors that they were detecting exactly what they expected to detect, nothing but empty corridors with no intruders present. The team moved through the detention complex like ghosts passing through walls, never seen and never heard by anyone. When Karathi guards appeared in their path, they simply disappeared, not killed because death left evidence, but rendered unconscious with targeted neural disruptors that would leave them with no memory of the encounter when they finally awakened. The Karathi would later find their guards alive and apparently unharmed, having seemingly fallen asleep on duty at the exact same moment. Across multiple security checkpoints throughout the facility, no one would ever be able to explain how this happened, and that mystery would haunt Karathi security forces for years to come. The team located Greg Patterson in a heavily armored transport vehicle in an underground parking structure, surrounded by 20 Karathi soldiers armed with the finest weapons their military could provide. The vehicle itself was shielded against every form of detection and equipped with biometric locks that required 3 separate Karathi officers to open simultaneously. Chris studied the situation for exactly 30 seconds before turning to his team with a slight smile. 20 guards and 1 armored vehicle with biometric security, he whispered. They really have no idea who they are dealing with. Lisa and Nick moved left, while Mary circled right, and Chris approached directly from the front, all 4 of them timing their movements with perfect synchronization, developed through years of training together. The first guard fell silently before anyone even knew the attack had begun, and then 6 more dropped in rapid succession as the team flowed through the enemy formation like water through sand. The Karathi soldiers were professional and well-trained, but they were trained for conventional combat against enemies who fought by predictable rules. They had no defense against opponents who struck from every direction simultaneously and who moved with such speed and precision that reacting seemed impossible. Within 90 seconds, all 20 guards lay unconscious on the ground, neatly arranged in a row by the humans, because even in the chaos of combat, special forces maintained discipline and order. Nick approached the biometric locks and attached his hacking device, while Lisa covered the entrances, and Mary checked the unconscious guards for any signs of consciousness returning. Locks are cycling now, reported, 30 seconds to full access. The armored door slid open to reveal Greg Patterson sitting calmly inside, with a knowing smile on his battered face. Took you long enough, he said quietly, as he rose to his feet. We had to wait for you to finish your vacation, Chris replied with a grin. Ready to leave this wonderful resort? More than ready, Greg confirmed as he accepted a weapon from Lisa and checked it with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. The team moved back through the facility even faster than they had entered, carrying Greg with them through maintenance tunnels and service corridors that the Karathi did not even know existed. They left behind a single item at the scene of the rescue, a human playing card showing the ace of spades, placed carefully on the chest of the lead unconscious guard. It was petty and unprofessional, and Chris knew that Command would probably reprimand him for it later. But Special Forces had learned long ago that fear was a weapon more powerful than any gun. The next time the Karathi considered taking a human hostage, they would remember this night. They would remember that no prison could hold what they had taken, and no guards could protect them from what would come to retrieve it. 3 hours later, the team reached their extraction point at an abandoned industrial facility on the outskirts of the city, where a stealth shuttle waited to carry them off the planet and back to friendly space. "Ghost Team to Overlord," Chris transmitted as the shuttle lifted silently into the night sky. "Package is secure, and we are en route to Extraction Point Alpha." "Excellent work, Ghost Team," came the reply. "Command sends their congratulations on another successful mission." Chris leaned back in his seat and allowed himself a moment of satisfaction as the shuttle broke through the atmosphere and accelerated toward the jump point that would take them home. Behind them, the Karathi government would soon discover that their prized hostage had vanished without a trace, leaving nothing behind but 20 unconscious guards and a single playing card that would become the symbol of their humiliation across the entire galaxy. The humans called them Special Forces, and now the Karathi understood exactly what that name meant. Major Beth Crawford sat in the Veterans Counseling Center on Armstrong Station and watched the young man across from her struggle to find words for things that most people could never understand. His name was Luke Peters, and he was 26 years old, recently discharged from Special Forces after 8 years of service that had taken him to dozens of worlds and through experiences that would break most human beings completely. Beth knew his file by heart because she had reviewed it carefully before their first session. But she also knew that files never told the whole story about what happened inside a person's mind. "Tell me about the dreams," she said gently, keeping her voice soft and free of judgment. Luke stared at his hands for a long moment before answering, and Beth noticed how strong those hands looked, while also noticing the slight tremor that he could not quite control. "I see them every night when I close my eyes," he said quietly. "Killed during my missions." He paused and took a deep breath before continuing. "Not the enemy combatants who were trying to kill me or my team, because those ones do not bother me much," he explained. "I can accept that we were soldiers fighting other soldiers, even if their species was different from mine." His voice dropped lower, and Beth had to lean forward slightly to hear him. "The ones who haunt me are the others," he admitted. "The ones who were just in the wrong place at the wrong time and got caught up in operations they never even knew were happening. We called them collateral damage in the mission reports," Luke continued, with bitterness creeping into his tone. "Just a word to describe innocent beings who died because they happened to be standing too close to our actual targets." Beth nodded slowly, because she understood exactly what he was describing from her own 15 years of service before she transitioned to counseling work. Her own dreams were filled with faces she wished she could forget, but knew she never would, no matter how many years passed. "The galaxy fears us," Luke said, as he finally looked up to meet her eyes. "They call us monsters and demons, and they tell their children stories about the human Special Forces who lurk in the dark, waiting to drag them away." He laughed, but there was no humor in it at all. "And you know what is the worst part?" he asked. "They are not wrong about us, because we really are exactly what they fear." "We are not monsters, Luke," Beth replied firmly. "We are soldiers who did what our species needed us to do." Are we really just soldiers, though? He challenged. I have done things that no soldier should ever do, and I have killed people in their own beds while they slept peacefully beside their families. His hands clenched into fists on the table between them. I have poisoned water supplies, knowing that innocent civilians would suffer. Along with military targets, he continued, I have destroyed infrastructure that kept ordinary people warm and fed because doing so would weaken the enemy government. The Geneva Conventions that our ancestors created to make warfare more humane do not apply when we fight alien species, Luke said. So we violate every principle they established whenever it serves our mission objectives. Beth had heard these same words from dozens of other veterans, because every Special Forces operator eventually wrestled with this truth about themselves. They were humanity's greatest warriors and humanity's greatest moral compromise, all wrapped into the same tortured individuals. Do you remember why you enlisted in the first place? She asked gently. Luke was silent for a moment before answering. I wanted to protect Earth and protect human beings from the threats we faced in a hostile galaxy, he finally replied. I was 18 years old, and I believed I could make a difference. And have you made a difference? Beth pressed. Have you protected humanity during your 8 years of service? Another long pause stretched between them before Luke nodded slowly. Yes, I have protected humanity, he admitted quietly. Every mission accomplished and every objective completed kept our people safer from species that wanted to enslave us or destroy us. The Valanthi would have conquered Earth and made slaves of every human being alive, Beth reminded him. The Thornax would have literally consumed us as food, and the Korathi wanted to turn us into a helpless client state with no freedom or autonomy. She leaned forward and held his gaze with the intensity that had made her such an effective operator in her own day. Every mission you completed, and every enemy you eliminated, and every impossible operation you survived, helped prevent those outcomes, she said firmly. You kept our children safe from horrors they will never have to face because of what you did. But the cost, Luke whispered. What about the cost of becoming what I had to become? This was the question that haunted every Special Forces veteran, because there was no easy answer and no comfortable way to frame the truth. They sacrificed pieces of their own humanity with every mission, and they learned to suppress empathy and ignore moral qualms, and do whatever was necessary to accomplish their objectives. When the missions were over and the wars were won, they had to find some way to live with what remained of themselves. The cost is higher than most people will ever understand, Beth acknowledged. Higher than anyone who has not lived through it can possibly imagine. She reached across the table and placed her hand over his clenched fists. But let me tell you something that they do not put in the recruitment materials or the training manuals, she said. Luke looked at her with eyes that held so much pain it almost broke her heart. The reason the galaxy fears us is not because we are monsters, Beth explained. They fear us because we are willing to become monsters in order to protect the people we love. She squeezed his hands gently. Every species in the galaxy has warriors of some kind, she continued, but only humans have warriors who will sacrifice their own souls to win, and that is not a weakness, Luke. That is the greatest strength our species possesses. Tears formed in his eyes as he listened to her words. Then why does it hurt so much? He asked with his voice breaking. Because you are still human, Beth answered simply. The day it stops hurting is the day you truly become the monster they believe you to be. She held his gaze with absolute conviction in her voice. As long as it hurts, and as long as you feel the weight of what you have done, you are still one of us, she said. You are still someone worth saving. Still someone who was fighting for something worth protecting. Luke broke down then, and the tears flowed freely as years of suppressed emotion finally found release in the safety of that small room. Beth held his hands and let him cry, because she knew from personal experience that this moment was the beginning of healing. The galaxy would always fear human special forces, and they would always tell stories about the terrible things these warriors could do. But they would never understand the price those warriors paid, or the burden they carried for the rest of their lives after the fighting was done. That was a truth known only to those who had walked the same dark paths, and survived to carry the weight of memory forward. Beth Crawford had survived, and now her mission was to help others like Luke find their way back to the light. It was perhaps the most important mission she had ever undertaken. 10 years had passed since first contact with the Volanthi, and humanity had received an invitation that no one in the galaxy had expected. The Galactic Council formally requested that Earth join as a full member species, with all the rights and responsibilities that status entailed. This invitation was unprecedented, because most species waited centuries before receiving such recognition. But humanity had proven itself unprecedented in countless ways since that first disastrous Volanthi invasion. Admiral Frank Goodwin led the human delegation to the Great Council Station, accompanied by diplomatic staff and a small honor guard that the Council had nervously insisted upon. The Council had specifically requested that no Special Forces personnel be included among the human representatives, and Frank had agreed to this condition immediately, without any argument. He did not mention that 3 of his diplomatic advisors were former Special Forces operators, retired into civilian government service, or that his personal aide, Sophie Marsh, had once assassinated an enemy head of state and escaped through 300 kilometers of hostile jungle territory. Some information was simply better left unshared with nervous alien hosts. The council chamber was vast beyond human imagination and filled with representatives from hundreds of different species who had gathered to witness this historic moment. Frank noticed the fear in many of their eyes as he walked toward the central podium, and he understood that this fear was both an asset and a challenge for humanity going forward. Distinguished species of the Galactic Council, he began in a clear and confident voice. Humanity is deeply honored by this invitation to join your assembly as partners in galactic civilization. He paused and let his gaze sweep slowly across the gathered representatives. We come before you today not as conquerors seeking to dominate. As potential friends seeking cooperation and mutual benefit for all species represented here, he continued. We offer our scientific knowledge and our artistic creativity and our boundless curiosity about the universe we all share, Frank said. We seek trade relationships and cultural exchange and the opportunity to learn from species far older and wiser than ourselves. Another pause as he gathered himself for the words that needed to be said. But let me be absolutely clear about one thing, Frank declared, and his voice took on a harder edge. We have heard the stories you tell about humanity, the legends of human special forces that haunt your children's nightmares and keep your military commanders awake at night. The chamber had gone completely silent as every representative listened with intense focus. Some of these stories are exaggerated beyond recognition, Frank admitted. But many of them are not exaggerated at all, and some of them actually understate the truth. He could see representatives shifting uncomfortably in their seats throughout the vast chamber. We did not create our special forces to terrorize the galaxy or to threaten peaceful species going about their business, he explained. We created them to survive in a universe that proved hostile from our very first steps into space. For most of human history, we fought wars against each other and developed capabilities to wage those wars with ever-increasing effectiveness, Frank continued. When we finally reached the stars and discovered that the galaxy was filled with species stronger and faster and more numerous than ourselves, we adapted what we already had. His voice rang out across the silent chamber with absolute conviction. Every species that has attacked humanity has learned the same hard lesson, he declared. You may possess larger fleets and superior technology and numbers that dwarf our own population 1,000 times. He leaned forward slightly, and his eyes seemed to meet every representative's gaze simultaneously. "But you will never outfight us," Frank stated firmly, "because we do not fight the way you expect, and we do not fight fair, and we will sacrifice absolutely anything, including our own morality, to protect our people from those who would harm them." The weight of those words settled over the chamber like a heavy blanket. "However," Frank said, and his tone softened noticeably, "we do not wish to fight anyone gathered in this chamber today, and we hope never to face any of you across a battlefield. We wish to live in peace and to explore the wonders of the cosmos, and to learn and grow alongside all of you as partners and eventually as friends," he continued. "Given the choice between making allies and making enemies, we will always choose allies every single time." High Counselor Yemeth rose from his seat with his bioluminescent skin glowing steadily. "Admiral Goodwin, the Council has one question that must be answered before we can vote on humanity's membership application," he said formally. Frank nodded respectfully and waited. "Your special forces represent the most fearsome military capability the galaxy has ever witnessed," Yemeth continued. "What assurance can you give us that this capability will never be turned against Council member species in the future?" Frank smiled, and it was a genuine expression without any threat behind it. "Counselor Yemeth, our special forces exist for one purpose and one purpose only," he replied. "They exist to protect humanity and human interests throughout the galaxy." He spread his hands in an open gesture. "The moment we join this council, all member species become our partners and our allies," Frank explained. "And we protect our allies just as fiercely as we protect ourselves, because betraying those who trust us is not something humans." His voice grew stronger as he delivered his final argument. "You have spent a decade living in fear of what human special forces might do to you," Frank acknowledged. "But I ask you now to imagine instead what human special forces might do for you." He looked around the chamber at hundreds of species who had known only fear of humanity until this moment. "Imagine knowing that if your world faces invasion, the most capable warriors in the galaxy will come to your defense," he said. "Imagine knowing that if your people are taken hostage, there are humans who will stop at nothing to bring them home safely. Imagine knowing that the monsters from your nightmares are now standing guard over your children while they sleep," Frank concluded. "That is what membership in the Council alongside humanity truly means." The vote was unanimous in favor of human membership. 20 years later, the galaxy had been transformed beyond all recognition. Galactic Council had expanded to include 347 member species protected by an alliance that no hostile force dared to challenge. Human special forces had evolved from feared killers into the galaxy's most respected peacekeepers. Not conquerors seeking territory, but guardians protecting the innocent wherever they were found. When rogue factions threatened peaceful worlds, or pirates preyed upon merchant vessels, or tyrants oppressed their own populations, the special forces responded with swift and decisive action. They were still feared, because fear served as a powerful deterrent against aggression. But now, that fear worked to protect rather than threaten. Colonel Tony Marsh stood on the observation deck of the starship Resolute, watching a convoy of refugee ships pass safely through what had once been the most dangerous region of known space. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "the Vandrix raiders have withdrawn, and they are broadcasting a surrender signal across all frequencies." Tony nodded with satisfaction. The Vandrix had attacked this convoy 6 hours earlier, expecting helpless prey. But they had not expected a Special Forces Rapid Response Team to appear from nowhere and systematically dismantle their entire fleet without killing a single raider. That was the new approach, because lethal force was reserved only for situations where no other option existed. Signal the convoy that they are clear to continue their journey, Tony ordered. And send a message to the Vandrix homeworld, informing them that this entire region is now under Council protection. He gazed out at the stars, stretching endlessly in every direction. Tell them that any further attacks will be met with appropriate response, he added quietly. He did not need to explain what appropriate response meant, because everyone in the galaxy already knew. The humans called them Special Forces. Galaxy had once prayed never to meet them in the darkness between stars. Now, they prayed that when trouble came, the Special Forces would be there waiting to meet it first. And they always were.